Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us to another wonderful episode of Ministering Over Fostering. And as usual, Lakeisha and I are super excited to have another wonderful, wonderful guest whom we just met, but I think we feel like we've known her for a very long time.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump right in. And Hamna, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and who you are and why you're even here today?
Sure. My name is Hamna. I'm 30 years old. I'm a BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I've been in the field for over 5 years now. I received my bachelor's degree in Anthropology. Totally was not looking to get into the field of behavior analysis. I didn't even know it was a thing. After getting my bachelor's degree, I kind of took a little bit of time off to figure out, what I wanted to do next. And that's when I kind of came across the field of ABA. I started working it was a non-public agency. So we worked for different school districts, and that's kind of where I got started. Honestly, I fell in love with it. It was, the ability to make a change in someone's life. And I finally felt like, I had found a job that gave me purpose and meaning. Once I found that area, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I started, pursuing my master's in the field. And over the years, I've worked with all different types of people, different types of families. I've worked in school settings, in home settings. I have had the privilege of working with a lot of, diverse population of families, and it's really been a great learning experience.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly are passionate about your work. When Lakeisha and I have talked to you the brief times that we have, we can see the passion. Go ahead, Lakeisha.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the passion is there. You could tell that you really want these kiddos to learn from this.
Definitely. And I felt like, we all kind of connected. Like the first time that I met you guys, we were kind of all like talking about the same thing. And you guys also have, a background in behavior. So I was kind of like, oh my God, like everything that I was saying, you guys were understanding. Everything you guys were saying, I was understanding. So I thought it was really great.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, we want to hear more. One, we know all about kind of going out on our own and starting something from scratch. So what prompted you to start your company, and tell us a little bit about the services you guys provide?
Yeah. So, after I was board certified, your position kind of changes and you have a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of see the inner workings, right, of how some of the ABA companies are running and kind of what their motivations are. And it was actually very eye-opening because I felt like some of their motivations did not align with my motivations of why, I was doing what I was doing. Like I had very little clinical say in a lot of things that I said or I wanted to do. A lot of times I felt like, when I wanted to advocate for a client, it was kind of like, oh, just do the least noisy thing that you can do and like, don't make a big deal about it. Or it was kind of made out to feel like, I was being difficult or trying to make things complicated, when really all I wanted to do was, help my clients and also help the staff that was, being supervised under me, right? Because sometimes I felt like they didn't have enough support. And when I wanted to support them, it was like, oh no, they don't need that. But it's like, they kind of do. So I wanted to be able to provide, quality care for all of the clients that I'm working with. And I wanted to make sure that, it was done in an ethical way, had what was best for my client's interest in mind. I wanted to be able to do this without having to fight for it or having to explain every single reason why I was making the decisions that I was making. So for example, if I wanted to provide additional training to a staff member, it would be like, no, they don't need any more training. And I'd be like, what do you mean? If I would say like, hey, like, I don't think this clinical team is a good fit for this client, which, can happen. And it doesn't mean that, somebody's not good at the job. It's just not a good fit. And it would just kind of be like, no, like, we're just going to keep it the way that it is. So it was a lot of little things that kind of, came together to motivate me to make this decision where I was like, I want to be able to do things, not without being questioned, because it's always, great to have people that are going to make sure that you're like, questioning yourself and checking in with yourself of why you're making the decisions that you're making. But it kind of gave me a chance to do things the way that, I wanted to approach it and to do what's best for the clients that I'm going to be working with. And so right now we are currently providing ABA therapy to our clients who are usually between the ages of 1 to 21. And the reason it's 21 is because that is typically the cutoff age for most insurances. After 21 years old, we switch over to Inland Regional Center. So not to say that ABA therapy is not accessible to, you know, adults over the age of 21. It's just that's when it kind of transitions off to back to the regional center, and it's kind of their decision. We are accepting most insurances. So right now we have IEHP, which is our biggest one. But then we have Anthem, TRICARE, Cigna, and Aetna. And then we're currently trying to get into contract with other insurances as well. Our ABA therapy is provided in home. There are, you know, some instances where we provide therapy in the school setting. It's just a whole process that you kind of have to go through. So it's mainly in home, out in the community, and we're mostly in Riverside and San Bernardino County.
Hearing you talk about that, I think there was an episode where Lakeisha and I talked about this minimum standard of care, because I think that's very prevalent too in social work. And the two reasons why you started off your company mirrored the reasons why Lakeisha and I started. So ethics and having more of the ability for matching, because we completely agree with you that I don't think it's a reflection either on foster parents when there's a child in the home that just does not match. I think that you have to be privy and understanding that some kids are going to do better off in a different environment, and that's okay, right? I think even us as clinicians, sometimes we have to give ourselves the ability to understand that we may not be a match for a family, and that's also okay. It's hard to say that, but it's true. But we talked about this minimum standard of care and how that could be so limiting and so debilitating, because it's almost like everyone assumes this is it and you can't do no more. And minimum means that's just the bottom line. You can do so much more, right, for this client to give a better service. But then the expectation is that then everybody has to work that way. And I think that's kind of what it brings it up. So I know Lakeisha is nodding at me, and I'm going to open.
Oh, yes. When you have staff that's dedicated to going above and beyond, that speaks volumes as far as the company. And it also shows that not every child is like this cookie cutter, right? Like the same child, like one size fits all, that you are actually customizing the services to fit that child's needs in hopes that they will meet these goals. So I wish all agencies followed this model, but unfortunately, this is something that's still a work in progress for many.
Definitely. Yeah. And you know what? And it makes me sad sometimes, because I'm not saying all companies, right? It could, you know, but some of the companies that I work with, parents don't realize that they're getting the bare minimum. They don't realize that there is so much more out there in terms of ABA services, and they just don't know because this has been their only experience, and they think, okay, this is what ABA is, when it could be so much more. And so that kind of, you know, and it will split up where some people are like, oh, ABA therapy does not work. And I want to learn more about that, because there are certain times where ABA therapy is not the right fit for certain people, and that's okay, right? And that's something that, you know, us in our field have to kind of understand, like, hey, like sometimes when people say like ABA does not work, it might not work for them. It might not be the right fit for them. And then other times it could be the experiences that they've had, to learn more about that and to kind of hear people's stories. But that also, you know, makes me wonder, like, who are the companies that are providing the services, and like, are they doing the best that they can? Because sometimes parents don't know any better.
Yeah. And you did bring up a good point about training your staff appropriately. I've been blessed when I worked in ABA that I worked for an amazing company that really took the time to train their staff. And I've also worked for another company in a very high position. And it's just like, you know, you're thrown into the fire and you have to figure it out. And when you take that extra time to try to train your staff, or you're there a little longer with your staff, that's when questions come up. But that's how they learn. And that's how you also know what services are being provided in the field.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's the difference now that I'm, you know, kind of doing this for myself, and I'm having the chance to create trainings the way that I want to do it and provide the trainings the way that I want to do it. I understand the difference, because if it's taking me 10 hours of training for a new staff, I'm the one that's providing the training. So I'm okay with literally being paid $0 to make sure that this person is trained properly. But when you're working for another company, they're kind of looking at, okay, I have to pay you for 10 hours of your time. I have to pay this person for 10 hours of their time. It's just, they'll learn it as they go. They'll figure it out. And I feel like that's like the unsaid thing that happens. But now that it's for myself, I'm like, well, no, I'm doing the training. I'm okay with spending all of this time and not really getting paid for it, because it's going to be worth it in the end when I have staff that are comfortable and able to do their job properly and are feeling supported.
Yeah, you're literally duplicating yourself to serve others.
Yes.
And not just that too, but I think like what a disservice it is for those that were going out, because when I got thrown out, when I did ABA, I kind of got thrown out too. And I was like, what do I do? What am I doing here? And, it's so hard to present yourself in front of a parent to say, this is what I'm supposed to do, but I have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's a reflection of the services, and it's not.
Yeah.
The services are amazing, but if I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm the one executing these services. And I think it's the same for social work. Lakeisha and I've talked so much about our training model, and you're not just going out into the homes to make sure the kids are okay. There's so much more as a social worker that's it's on our shoulders, but the training has a lot to do with it. So that's leading me to this next question on what are ABA services, because we've been throwing out this term ABA, and we've had some discussions with some foster parents who don't even know ABA exists. They didn't even know what to ask for. So can you tell us what ABA is and kind of what that entails, maybe for someone who's never heard of that before?
Yeah, so ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. It's basically a type of behavioral health treatment. That's what it would be classified as. And basically what we're doing is we're using it to change or modify behaviors. And we do this, and we can use ABA to increase desired behaviors, and we can use it to reduce undesired behaviors. So for example, ABA therapy, we can use it to reduce unsafe behaviors such as self-harm or aggression. And we can also use it to teach language and communication skills, daily living skills, social skills. So kind of to sum it up, in like the most simple terms that I can kind of think of, we basically figure out why a behavior is occurring, right? What's causing it to happen, or why something is not happening. Why is a specific skill that a 4-year-old child should have, why is that skill not happening, right? And so we figure out what's missing in the environment. We figure out what is not allowing this behavior to happen, or what is causing this behavior to happen. So is it something in the child's environment? Is it a skill that they have not learned yet? Is it a skill that they know, but they're just not using it functionally, or at the times that they should be using it? So we kind of get all of this information, and then we figure out what we need to do. So for example, maybe you have a child that tantrums instead of communicating that they're hungry, right? So what would we do? We would go in, figure out what are the times, all of the information around that behavior, and then we can use that to maybe teach them how to identify when they're feeling hungry, right? And then we can teach them how to communicate feeling hungry in a more effective and functional way. So over time, basically what they learn is, hey, if I'm hungry, I can, say I'm hungry, touch my stomach, point to a text board or a picture board of a stomach, depending on what your level of need at the time. Anything like that. I can do that instead of having a tantrum, and I still get the same thing. So that's basically what it is.
Now, for those that have heard of ABA and they think it's only for individuals diagnosed with autism or other related disabilities, is that the case, or can you use ABA for other behaviors as well, or for individuals who are not diagnosed?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because sometimes ABA gets kind of pushed in with or categorized as like a treatment for autism, when in reality, the principles of ABA are being used all around us all the time. So you don't necessarily need to have a diagnosed disability or disorder in order to be able to implement ABA interventions or strategies. So basically, when I start working with a client, I'm not treating them based on what their diagnosis is, right? What I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm creating a treatment plan based on the deficits that are observed. No two children with autism or, for example, ADHD are going to have the same areas of need, especially with autism, because it's a spectrum, right? So no two kids have the same level of need or require the same amount of support. Each child is given support in an individualized way. I'm not going in and saying, okay, autism level 1, here's the treatment plan for this. Autism level 2, here's the treatment plan for this. It's based on every single child's areas of need and the areas that they need the most support in. So it doesn't have to be with somebody that's diagnosed with autism. Now, the only I would say like barrier towards that is most commercial insurances will not cover ABA therapy unless you have an autism diagnosis. So far, IEHP, which is one of the insurances that we work with, they will provide ABA therapy as long as there is a need and you don't need to have an autism diagnosis. So that one, it allows there to be more access to care for a lot of kids that need it, because there are a lot of kids that don't have autism, but they definitely need help because they're not able to, function in their daily lives, without the need of some type of intervention.
Yeah, I think that statement that you just made is so impactful, because people might be asking, why are you here through Ministering Over Fostering if we work with foster youth or foster children? Mm-hmm. But that's one of the reasons why you're here, is because we have seen this, right, Lakeisha, with children who are in care. Sometimes trauma can hinder certain developmental milestones, communication, certain behaviors that are supposed to be occurring. Or maybe I'm so, dysregulated with some of the situations that are happening that my form of communication may not be the most appropriate. And we are looking at tantrums or throwing items or aggression, which those then need to be reduced. And so I do highly, highly agree with that statement that this is needed for more kids than those who are just diagnosed with autism. I don't know if you had something to add on to that, Lakeisha.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about too, like, think about the children that are placed in numerous settings, and on paper we see, oh, they don't use their words, right? They're nonverbal, but then they get put in the right environment and then they do speak. But to have a service like this can actually help them as well. So I love everything about it. Myra and myself have seen miracles work just with services. And I feel like with us having that background, we've been able to identify a lot more. Whereas, some people might walk into a home and say, oh, they're just acting out, it's terrible twos or whatever. But in order to actually have that child become a little bit more successful in life, it's better to identify it at an earlier age.
Yeah, and I always, when I'm talking to parents, I always, try to make sure that they understand, like, there is a level of developmentally appropriate behaviors, right? So it's developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old to have a tantrum. There's a point where it becomes no longer developmentally appropriate, and that's where we come in to kind of help figure out what's going on. So, if you're having 50 tantrums a day for a 3-year-old, that is probably too many tantrums, right? So that's where we kind of come in to figure out what's going on. Kids crying is developmentally appropriate. So it's just really figuring out at what point is it no longer an appropriate behavior for them to be engaging in. And that's kind of where we would come in. And, kind of talking about, kids in the foster system, or like kids that have been through the foster care system, they've been through a lot of trauma. And so, and then if you place them in a home and they're having behaviors and, they're having a little bit of a hard time kind of adapting to their situations, most of the time what ends up happening, and you guys can probably speak more on this, is either, the foster parents just give up and let the kids do whatever they're doing instead of trying to help them, or they ask for a change of placement. And that just adds on to that trauma.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it does. And I think it just, once the case gets too difficult, too, one of the things that we've noticed is when a child gets placed in a situation where they're starting to feel safe, then that's when some of these behaviors start to increase, these maladaptive behaviors, because they're feeling safe enough to process them. And that's generally when a foster parent might say, when I got them, they weren't acting this way, and now they're acting this way. Like, now we want to put in a notice to get this child out of the way. When in reality, that's when we need to target these behaviors, because this means the child is feeling safe enough to engage in them, and they couldn't do that before. They couldn't express these before. So I think a service like yours would be wonderful at this stage where, we call it the honeymoon phase is over. They're feeling comfortable in the home. And then we can target some of these things and say, what's really happening and where is this coming from? So thank you so much for this insight, because I think this is important to hear. Maybe our foster parents didn't even know this was an option, especially if they have IEHP and they're willing to cover it for them.
Definitely.
I do want to say that even as an adult, I've used some of these ABA practices on myself, or some of these techniques. Like, you know, if you're trying to increase a behavior that you don't, it doesn't come natural, right? Like maybe I'm trying to get into doing some exercise. Or I remember when we first got married, my husband and I started providing a lot of positive reinforcement when he would wash the dishes. And now I don't need to do that. Now it's just a natural thing. And it sounds silly, but some of those things, like those are techniques that I learned. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this even works in like day-to-day stuff. And we don't think about it. The beauty of ABA.
It definitely works, and we use it all around us. And I just think that, like, you know, people don't realize that we do, because not a lot of people are aware, right? I feel like ABA is still fairly new. People are starting to hear more about it. Yeah, a lot of the times, like, I didn't know what ABA was 10 years ago. It is used all around us, and it is really, really beneficial, and it is really effective. But you just have to, you know, it's a lot about the way that you're implementing those strategies.
Speaking of using it every day, it's funny because when you said that, automatically I'm visualizing the first and then chart.
Yeah.
Like, well, first, if you work out, then you can have this.
Yeah.
So you're very true. It's a very true fact.
Yeah, the problem is when you do first, I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to have a donut because I worked out. Then
yes.
That's the problem.
Yes. Or like, you know, how we, like, if you look at my desk, I have Post-it notes everywhere of like things that I need to do. What are those? Those are prompts, right? We're putting reminders for ourselves to remember things that we need to do. Our keys are right by our front door most of the time. Why? Because we're trying not to forget that we need to take them on our way out. So little things like that where we don't realize, like, oh, it's an everyday thing.
Yeah, you're so right. Well, with that being said, all jokes aside, although it's really true what we're talking about, but we do work with foster parents who may not know what to do in the cases where they get children or youth who are engaging in some of this maladaptive behavior, right? And so this is what we were talking about. Once a child starts feeling safe and starts engaging in some of these behaviors, this is kind of where some foster parents call it a quits, or say we want to switch placements. So what is some of the advice that you can give foster parents that might be experiencing some of this? So it's kind of a two-part question, some advice for that. And then what would you tell them that could help them to continue helping these children once the services are over? Because one of the things that we notice is if ABA has concluded, or therapy has concluded, or whatever type of service, then now I don't know what to do because my help is gone. But really the continuation should still happen after the services are gone. So what advice would you give us for that?
Okay. So for the first part of the question, I would say it's all about having structure and routine. You need to set ground rules and have boundaries in place, and then we need to make sure that we're following those with consistency. A lot of the times we might think that if we're setting boundaries with kids, that they might, you know, dislike us, or it's going to make them upset, or it's going to make the situation even worse. But you'd be surprised to see how well kids do with consistency and structure. And then we also want to make sure that we're approaching our kids from a place of understanding and compassion. So, and this goes for all children, but especially for kids, you know, that have been dealing with the foster system, or, you know, that are in the foster system, have gone through the foster system, because, you know, as we kind of mentioned, they're probably dealing with some form of trauma, you know, from all the changes that they've kind of had to go through. And really, all they're really wanting is some form of control and say in their lives. And a lot of the times, maladaptive behaviors are a way of communicating, right? It's a form of communication. They're trying to express something, and we just need to be able to kind of switch that and teach them how to express that in a more safe and appropriate way. So, you know, all they want is some form of control in their lives, and it's okay to give them that, right? It's okay to compromise. It's okay to, you know, give them options and choices. We just need to set in place those things that are negotiables and those that are non-negotiables. And kind of to speak a little bit on, you know, what parents should do, like once ABA therapy ends, or like the therapist goes home for the day. And honestly, it's all about utilizing and maintaining the same strategies and boundaries that have been set in place, right? So ABA therapy can be so effective and it's so beneficial. I've seen how it can change the lives of, you know, some of the families that we work with, but really that is determined by how well the interventions remain in place once we go home for the day or once the services end, right? So that's why we offer caretaker teaching. That's why, caretaker participation is so important, so that they're able to see the plan that's being implemented. And so we can teach them how to do the same thing. When we're providing ABA services, maybe we're there for 2-3 hours a day, right? But that is just 2-3 hours of the day out of a whole entire day. So when we're not there, the family is the one that has to continue doing the same things that we've kind of been doing during therapy sessions. That's the only way that it's going to work. And sometimes I feel like and I understand, parents are busy, they have a lot going on. When a therapist is there, it's kind of their chance to kind of take a step back and not have to be the primary person dealing with behaviors or anything that's happening. When we talk about caretaker participation, it doesn't have to be the full 3 hours Monday through Friday, right? But there needs to be some level of, participation for them to be able to understand what to do. As far as discharging of services, so for ABA therapy to completely end, there's so many things you need to look at before you do that, because sometimes what ends up happening is all the behaviors are gone, okay, we're done. But were those behaviors generalized? Were those behaviors maintained over a certain amount of time? All of that stuff matters. So if they're able to do all of these things with the technician, can they also do it with mom? Can they also do it with dad? Can they do it with the siblings? Can they do it with grandma? So it needs to generalize to different people, different settings. So there's a lot that needs to happen before you should be discharging. And sometimes if we're too quick to do that, it doesn't really work out that well, because then those behaviors can come back. Same thing with has a client met all the goals, but has the caretaker been taught how to make sure that all of these things remain in place? So a lot of those factors go into how effective ABA therapy can be.
You just gave such a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
I do want to state that there was something you said initially about these behaviors. I think if we took the time to notice this perspective, if we just realized that maladaptive behavior is a form of communication, I think it would relieve a lot of tension that adults experience when children are doing this, because you can be put in a position where you feel so out of control. You don't know when these behaviors are going to come up. I've had, foster parents who say, I'm scared that they're going to do this at the store, or if I'm doing something like that, and then what am I going to do? And, there's just such a burden or such a heaviness for what is this going to look like for me if I'm out and someone sees this. And I think if we had this perspective that this child is communicating something, particularly in our field with the trauma they've experienced, like Keisha was saying, and that's so true for us, they might have been in multiple homes already. And so I've adjusted to one way of living, and now I'm in a whole new home, and now I'm having to adjust again. And then I was moved from there, and the consistent abandonment or rejection, I mean, they're communicating something. And there is this need for, this is what I have control over, right? I may not have control over my environment.
Yep.
Families are being chosen for me, where I'm going, what's happening, when I see my family, when I don't see my family. I do have control over my emotions and how I'm expressing them.
Yep.
And sometimes that's
100%.
So thank you for saying that, because I think people need to hear that. I think it's important for people to know that this is a form of communication, and maybe that they'll be more open to services, the longevity of services, like you were saying, for foster parents to be able to be involved. It's not a break, right? ABA doesn't mean it's a break and you can just kind of leave and not have to worry, because this is going to be something that you may need to implement and you're going to need to continue. And so participation is so important. I don't know, Lakeisha, if you wanted to chime in before I continue.
Yeah, just to chime in too, when I think of ABA, and I know a lot of times I've heard in the past, parents think, oh, well, the technician's just bringing a bag and they're just playing with my child. It's it's more than that. But I think of some of the kids that we've seen in foster care, a lot of them do not even know how to play appropriately because they've been put in situations or I should say grown up situations, so they don't know how to properly play with their peers. So this is also a step to teach them how to, appropriately do this.
Yeah. And, and you bring up a good point about, the play part of it. So you can get so much done when you teach through play, and it's so much easier. And I know, like, you know, in the field of ABA, we have like two of our main forms of teaching, right? It's natural environment teaching, and then we have discrete trial training, right? So those are kind of the two ends that you'll see. You'll see some clinicians kind of going more, you know, gravitating more towards one way, and then, you know, some that go towards another way, some that are kind of in the middle. For me, I think it's more of like, you know, I'm in the middle, what's the needs of the client, right? Like, are they going to do better with all, you know, like play-based therapy? Do they need, you know, some more of those like structured, repetitive teaching methods? So, you know, it kind of, and that's why I always talk to parents and I'll let them know, like, hey, your child is 2 years old. You're not going to see us sitting at a table, you know, doing this like structured routine type of thing. That we're going to play a lot. It's going to look like we're just having fun, but that's part of the process, right? That's part of what we're doing. So I think it's a lot of just, you know, constantly talking to parents or caretakers and just, you know, keeping them in the loop, right? Letting them know, like, hey, this is what we're working on, and this is how we're doing it. So I do a lot of like narrating. I do a lot of narrating when I play, like when I'm, you know, interacting with kids, but I also do a lot of narrating when like caretakers are there, and I'm kind of telling them like step by step, like why I'm doing what I'm doing, what is the objective, what am I hoping to gain from doing it this way. So I always, you know, kind of let them know what's going on, and I feel like it kind of helps them to understand better like the strategies that we're using as well.
Yeah, I love that perspective of getting the parents involved to let them know, because I do think, generally speaking, parents just don't know what to expect. And if they don't know what to expect, and they're seeing this person coming in 2 or 3 hours, and it looks like my kid's just having a blast in the room and they're having all this fun, then I assume, is it a waste of my time? What am I doing? But if they're understanding of this, because for me, I agree, I was kind of in the middle as well when I was doing it. There were some things that we needed to teach that were very structural, and sometimes it started off very structured and then it moved into more of a natural way of teaching. Sometimes we had to kind of gradually move into that. But I feel like one of the reasons why, if we stick too much to just this structure, we lose on the parents as well, because a parent is not going to be able to sit there with their child to do certain things like this for hours and hours on end. So in order for it to become something adaptable for the family, it does need to be happening at their own time when it's the behaviors occurring. How do I respond? What do I do? What's the more natural form of doing this? And then that's when you see some of the success, is that parents are like, oh, I saw the clinician do this and it worked, and now I get to do this too. So it's such a combination, but I think the communication piece from the clinicians is important, that the parents know what you're doing, why it worked, why it didn't work, and what we can do next, so they understand what's happening.
Definitely. And, you know, especially when it comes to behaviors, right? I think that you kind of need to know what to do, right? When a behavior is happening, you need to know how to prevent the behaviors from happening. And all of that will come through like that caretaker training, and also kind of just watching what we're doing. That is one area. And like, I've had parents that are like, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the behavior because they act so great when they go here, when they go there, but like all these behaviors are happening in the home. And that's when I kind of let them know, like, hey, we're going to be coming in the home. So we're going to be in the setting where the behaviors are naturally occurring. And so we're going to see it. It's going to eventually happen. There might be a honeymoon phase, right? But we're going to eventually see those behaviors. And that's how it kind of comes up. Like, let's say if your child gets really, really upset if you take something away from them, or if you grab their toy, we're going to be put in those situations where we're playing, where, you know, sharing and turn taking are things that need to happen. And, you know, sometimes in between that, the behavior, you see a maladaptive behavior. And then when that happens, that's when we're like, okay, this is a teachable moment. Watch how we're going to handle this behavior, because this is what we want you to do as well. And it's not, you know, a magic fix. So sometimes when we go in and we, you know, deal with a maladaptive behavior, it looks like it just, you know, like, oh, like you just handled the behavior like nothing even happened, right? And then when parents or caretakers try to do it, there's sometimes more pushback. And it's not always that case. Like sometimes there's pushback for us as well, but sometimes there isn't, right? But when parents or caretakers try to go and, you know, deal with the behavior, there's pushback. And, you know, they're kind of like, oh, see, it doesn't work. It works for you, but it's not working for me. And I really try to explain to caretakers, like, okay, the reason that is probably happening is because there is a history between you and this child. There are all these attempts of creating boundaries that maybe didn't stick through, right? There's a lot of stuff that's happened in between, and it's all about kind of changing and modifying that relationship. And so it takes a little bit of time.
One thing I would notice too is we were paired with positive experiences with the child, right? Like we're coming in, we're paired with, we built all this rapport, they're all of the fun things. And so sometimes even the parent getting involved during those positive experiences like play was very helpful, because now we're pairing you with positive experiences, not just the corrective ones, right? So if parents are just coming in to correct, to say, hey, you're not doing this, or we need to do that, then you're not paired with positive experiences, which is where that pushback would come in. So really getting even the parent involved in that is very helpful too.
Definitely.
So as we start closing our interview for today, Hamna, we do want to ask you, what is some advice you have for some of the youth who might be interested in this career? We can think of some of the youth we've talked to about this that are probably going to be listening to this episode and they're going to be soaking it all in. But what is some experience you can give to somebody who might be thinking about this, or maybe just heard about ABA, didn't even know that was an option? What would you tell them?
Okay, so I think first I want to talk about like just in general, like any interested in any career field, right? I would say like it's really, really important to follow your passion. Working in any field, especially in the special needs field, can be really tough, right? It's really overwhelming. There's a lot of burnout, but it's worth it, right? It's so worth it in the end when you see all of the progress and the changes that you're making. It gives you, meaning, because you're going out there and you're making all these, you're helping people. And so definitely worth it. One thing that I would say is don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't accomplish something, right? Especially maybe if you faced adversity in your life to kind of get to, the point that you're at, or maybe you didn't take school as seriously as you should have when you were younger, right? Things like that can happen. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't accomplish something because of like your past history, right? And I kind of want to share a little bit more about my journey. So technically, I dropped out of high school. I'm telling people this. Technically, I dropped out of high school, right? So when I was in high school, there was a lot going on in my life, in my family. So I ended up, I wasn't going to be able to get my A through G requirements for high school. So I ended up dropping out because I would have had to go into like adult continuing school, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I got my CHESP, so it's a California High School Proficiency Exam. It's basically equivalent to a GED, but like in California. I ended up taking that test. Then I went to community college. I transferred out of community college, and that was a whole entire thing to deal with. It took me much longer than it takes normal people to typically transfer out. But despite all of that, I graduated UCR with honors. I graduated my master's degree with honors, and I passed my board certification. And I'm not good at standardized testing at all. And, if you guys have heard about the BCBA exam, like it's a whole thing. Like you get 2 years and 8 tries, right? So you definitely, it's not an easy test. I passed it on my birthday, and here I am, right? And all of that to kind of just say you can accomplish anything that you set your mind to. So for all of, the youth that you're kind of talking to and helping, and that you're that are going to be hearing this, you can accomplish anything that you want, that you set your mind to, right? Don't let anybody tell you that you can't because you didn't do great in high school. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't because it's too late, right? Because you've wasted all this time, because really there is no timeline but your own. And then in terms of choosing a career, I would say really, really important to choose a career that you love. Now, you're not going to love your career every single day, right? There's going to be days where you're going to wake up and be like, oh my God, I'm so tired, I'm so overwhelmed, right? But for the most part, it has to be something that you enjoy doing, because, and I almost made this mistake when I was younger, where I was trying to figure out what career I wanted. And I was like, oh, like if I do this, I'll make a lot of money and I'll have a stable income. But I'll tell you, eventually all of that fades away, right? And your perspectives are going to change when you have to wake up every single day and do the same job, same type of job every single day. Your perspectives change, and that easy schedule, or that making a lot of money, after a while is no longer important. And that's when you have to make sure that the career that you've chosen, you have some form of passion for it, or else you're going to be miserable. In terms of, getting into the ABA field, my advice would be try to shadow people that are in the field. Try the entry-level job, right? See if it's something that you can see yourself doing every single day. if that's when you kind of know, okay, is this a career for me or not? Can I see myself doing this every single day? And that will kind of help you deciding whether you want to do this or not. And I'm always open to, helping anybody that wants to learn more information about this field, learn about what ABA is, how to get into the field. So I'm, more than happy to talk to anybody that would like to learn more about that.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, you said so many key aspects about this, but I love that you touch based on that in society, right? Like you may not have had this picture perfect way as how to get to your career, but you did it. And a lot of times we come into contact with youth, young adults that think that that's the end. Like they didn't finish high school, or they they barely got their diploma, and now they don't know what to do after high school. So they're like, oh, well, what age did you get this, or what age did this person get this by? Shouldn't I have this by this age? And you're right. There is no formula as to when you are supposed to get these. So thank you for touching base on that. And then also, I love that you are open to teaching, anybody that has an interest in this field, because that's what we need. We need more mentors. We need more people that are open about this career and other careers, because I'll be honest, once I got my degree, I had no clue what I was supposed to do. I got into the field of ABA, did not know anything about it. I was just so grateful that someone gave me an opportunity, and I absolutely loved it. And I actually was attending school to become a BCBA as well. Oh. But hats off to you, because all the math part, I was like, I can't do it. But it's an amazing field that's very rewarding. So if people can do it and you have any interest in this field, definitely look into it. Because I didn't even know that a BCBA existed until I was in the field.
It's a field that a lot of people don't know about, but it is a growing field, and there's, a big need. There's a huge need for people in the field, because, and I think it's because people say like, oh, the amount of kids with autism is growing. I think what's happening is now we're able to properly diagnose a lot of kids that maybe, in the past were not as easily diagnosed. So I don't think the numbers per se are rising. I think it's just we have better ways of being able to, assess and evaluate and find out what's going on. And so I think, it's a growing field, and it's a field with, a lot of need for people to join in.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I appreciate that you were so transparent with the youth about your journey, because one of the reasons why too we decided to open this channel is to let people know that there is reality. We live in such a fantasy world, right? You look at social media and everyone just posts the best pictures. Nobody posts on hard days. No one's saying the truth about certain things. And so we want our youth to know that some of us didn't wake up one morning and know exactly what we were put on this earth to do. Some of us, it took us trial and error. And, our journey wasn't the same as if everybody else's. We all have our own journey. We all have kind of what leads us to where we are. I never thought I was going to be a social worker. I remember when I was in college and we started taking psychology courses, I was like, oh no, social workers burn out. I don't want to do that. And I remember when I started, I was doing ABA, and I absolutely love working as an ABA clinician. I had been moved to a supervisor, so I was starting to write some of the programming, and I was doing a lot of the training, which I absolutely enjoyed doing the training portion of it. But I was doing that, and I got this opportunity. Someone was like, we think you'd be a good fit. And I'm like, I can't say no. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and why not give it a shot? And I was introduced to social work, and my heart, when I tell you that I was like, this is what I was put on this earth to do. It's exactly what I was put on this earth to do. And here we are, Lakeisha and I now, years later, her and I met, and I was like, I'm like, where's my friend been all my life? And two, like, what do we do? How can we make this world a slightly better place for the kids that we come into contact with? And I think that's where passion comes in, but it takes time. And Lakeisha and I are a little bit older, and sometimes people talk to us and they're like, you're just starting this at this age. Yeah, there's no limit. And what you said is so right. Like, you're on nobody else's time but your own. This is your timeline. So whatever it takes, however it takes, I had to be so forgiving of myself that I didn't reach this milestone at a certain age, because my life was hard. Like, I had to go through hard things that maybe typical kids didn't have to go through, and that made my timeline get pushed back, and that's okay. So thank you so much for opening your heart with us and sharing that, because we love to introduce our kids to people who are just going to be raw and honest. They're living a hard life, and this is really part of the experience they need to have. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, if anyone's like, I have IHP, I have a child with autism, I'm looking for a company, I'm looking for somewhere to take my kids to get evaluated, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we have our website. It's advbehavioral.com. We also have all on there, you'll find information. So the best way to get in contact would be to call us. You can also email us. Our email and phone number, everything is on there. And so usually what I like to do is, like, with the first step is kind of just talk to the family and kind of, understand and figure out what they're looking for. And then kind of, depending on where they are, because you do need a referral for ABA therapy in order to receive services. So it just really depends, like, where you are in that aspect. So if you have a referral, then it's pretty smooth. I'll, tell you, like, hey, call IHP, and do this, like, call IHP, tell them this, and then I'll get in touch with you when we hear back. Same thing with, if they don't have a referral, then I kind of, help them figure out, like, how to get that referral. If it's a different insurance company, then it's a little bit different, right? Like, they have to send me all of their, like, autism diagnosis information, all of that stuff. So it's a little bit of a different process. That's why I like to talk to the family first to kind of figure out, like, what their insurance is, where they are in that step, and how we can move forward.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you have any final words, Lakeisha, before we start closing out today.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again for taking your precious time to come do this interview. When we met you, like Myra said, we absolutely felt like we just knew you forever. And I think that seeing, like, your post on Instagram and then looking at your website and then meeting you, though, all three, they speak volumes as to the service that you provide. And you could tell that you are really for the kids and the families who you serve. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for having me on here. This is my first time doing something like this. I'm not a good public speaker. I'm probably not going to watch the video because I don't want to see or hear myself talking. So I'll take your word for how it went. But thank you guys so much for having me on here. It's really great to be able to, talk about ABA. I could talk about ABA all day, all night. So it's great to find like-minded people that are letting me talk about it on recorded video. So that was great. Thank you.
Well, you're amazing. So definitely watch the video.
I was just going to say, you're such a natural. I don't understand.
Oh, thank you.
But thank you so much. We're really appreciative of your relationship, your openness, your connection. We've already sent foster parents to you that we've come into contact.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We are very cognizant of who we get ourselves revolved around, because of course all of the kids that we work with are part of that life, and we're very particular about who we partner with. So we're very thankful for you, truly thankful, and for your time. And we know that this episode's going to be just wonderful, and we'll still send it to you even if you don't hear it, but you'll get it anyway.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Ministering Over Fostering, and we cannot wait to catch you on the next one. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.